Thank you all for being here. Really excited to get started. We've got a great group of individuals here. Um, oh, and if you're watching this on YouTube, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. That's as helpful. Do that, please, right? Consider becoming a YouTube member team that joined by supporting us that way. All right, topic one. Oh, fuck. I have to introduce you guys. I forgot about that.
Do you have to? We can just roll.
Yes, you guys want to just roll? All right.
Yeah.
All right,
It's stink down here.
All right, we got.
No, don't listen to Bam. He
I
just
need to
saying
get.
that because he on the
I need to
bottom
get my
rung.
spot. It's stink down here.
Do the introductions, Prime. Don't let this nigga buck the traditions of the
There we go.
ABE.
Saw that coming.
That's
It probably still stink up there. It was you all along.
All
Not
right,
that bad.
I appreciate it, bro.
No problem, no problem, and no, thank you for being here. So we'll do it quick since we're like pretty late in getting started. So we'll start with Bam. Thank you, Bam, a Black American mate for coming through, right? Looking sharp as always, right? So thanks for being around. We'll go to our friend Isle, thank you as well for coming through and being a part of this. Isle's been fantastic, new addition to this channel. We've been very happy to have them. Next, our friend DeAndre Pace, who is fantastic, right? Conservative, coming on, fighting the good fight against these filthy socialists, right? That I keep letting on here. All right, thank you, DeAndre Pace, right? Keeping America free. All right, next we have Fanatic. Fanatic, one of the great ones here. Long time panelist, right? One of our MVPs. Thank you, Fanatic, for coming through. And we have our friend Pyro. Pyro is a mod here, and a great one. We appreciate his support. Appreciate him being around, right? He's a busy guy, right? Out there making ends meet. But sometimes he comes through with the channel, helps us out. We do appreciate it. GSU Gambit, long time supporter of this community. Been here forever, right? Absolutely, definitely one of our most valuable players as well. Thank you, GSU Gambit, for the kindness, right? So he's here as well. And also a very busy guy, so we don't get to him as often as we want these days. Water Kai, new guy, great guy. Thank you. One Piece guy, so better than the rest. To Taj Bin John. They are Taj Bin John. We've had only a few times on the channel, but we've definitely enjoyed him. So I'm really happy that you were able to say yes here and join us. Okay, there we are. All right, fast. Topic one. When we talk about the gun culture in America, we often do so from a white perspective. But is there a significant pro-gun culture in the Black community? And should it be encouraged? Considering what gun violence has done to some of our poorest neighborhoods, does it make sense that citizens should want to ban those weapons, or should they want to have those weapons to protect themselves from, what happens in those neighborhoods? Talking about that gun culture, and especially with like new gun safety bills coming around, right? Where should people stand? I think Black people have a very complicated relationship with guns in this country, right? And it shows in how we vote, I think. So I'm curious what you all say about that. Start with Bam.
In case any of y'all ever catch me in the streets, I keep that thing on me at all times. No, I think the Black people generally have a positive opinion on guns, a negative relationship with guns, even though that's really controversial. Like dating back to the Panthers, and before then, Black people have never, overall, have never felt like police were able to properly defend us. So we've always had a strong pride in having some level of defense for ourselves. And yeah, I think the guns are generally fine. I think if you look at all the stats on gun violence, America is far worse than other countries. But I don't think you can solve, I think it's too late to solve a lot of these issues just due to the number of guns in America. So there is common sense gun regulation that can be done, but I think overall Black people's opinions on guns are mostly healthy.
So much Isle.
I agree with Black America Made. I think that, we should try our best to have common sense gun regulations, but we should be able to have guns in our home, be able to conceal carry, open carry, if depending on the jurisdiction. And because if white people are the only people who have guns, well, then that's just another vector for white supremacy, is it really? So I don't think that we should disarm ourselves if we're not going to disarm other communities. And so I think that you know, as far as culture is concerned, I think that there might be a little bit of things that we can address in the black community about guns, like try our best to like stop with gun crime, but other than that, I think that we have like a pretty okay handle on guns in America, so I think that we got this. So
Pace.
Well, firstly, I hate the idea and term gun violence because it's just violence. But as far as guns are concerned, I don't really see a problem as far as culture. The guns don't have too much to do with the culture of blacks in America. The issue that I see with this particular topic is the idea of disarming blacks, particularly the ones that live in the inner cities. You would open up law-abiding Black American citizens to just complete bloodshed from these people out there who don't mind breaking the law. So I don't see it as a problem for blacks to have a firearm. I personally don't own a firearm. I own several other types of weapons, but no firearms because I'm just not a gun guy. But you can't leave them on their own, just like everybody else. They go to the gun because it is the most common and the best form of self-defense that a person can have in the modern age.
Please tell me you have nunchucks. Please say yes.
Not
My
nunchucks,
nunchucks broke.
just a sword.
Oh. Okay.
Well, multiple swords and axes and other stuff.
All right. All right. Well,
He also keep that thing on him. 'Cause
Fanatic, please.
Yeah, so I mean, black people do have like a kind of I guess we have a history with guns, and I think the history would be a much more positive one if it wasn't for systemic racism. So I've seen these really impressive videos where you have white people and black people both open carrying rifles, walking down the street, which is completely legal in places, and the white guy, like, they stop him, like, hey, what's going on, da 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 da, or they nod at him, police officers nod at him, like, hey, what's going on? Okay, what is that? He's like, yeah, no, I'm just going down the street, just having a good time, da 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 da. No problem. Black dudes carrying the exact same rifle, same area. All of a sudden, literally 5 cars come up. They order him down to the ground. They confiscate the gun from him until he can prove like that he's allowed to have it later on, as if it is in common law in the exact same district. It's really nuts. So I think even when we look at like California was a lot more cool on guns until the Black Panthers decided, hey, we're about to go ahead and occupy one of these court buildings. Now we're not going to be brandishing our weapons. None of them will be loaded, so no gun can accidentally go off or anything. We're just going to have our weapons with us, and lo and behold, then it was like, you know what? We don't like you. We don't like people having guns. In fact, we're kind of we're about disarming at this point, and that's what they went and did. So I think, yes, black people might have a kind of a weird history with guns, but I think that weird history with guns only is because of again, systemic racism. That's why.
Thank you so much. Ira, please.
It's 100% like everyone else has mentioned it. Black people have a unique history in this country when it comes to guns. That's fine. Is there a pro gun culture community within the black community? 100% I would say so. Like there is definitely something about having defense on you at all times that, maybe isn't prevalent in all of the black community, but I've noticed it in my community specifically that like most people like to have something on them that they can use to defend themselves. Most times it's a gun. We're not fucking British, other than DeAndre. We don't carry swords and shit like that. Like I don't know what fucking UK shit this is. Um, should it be encouraged? I 100% think so. I think that the gun culture we have should be encouraged to transform and evolve. So it's not just like a solitary protect yourself, protect your family type deal. I want it to be so as much that the community is integrated, so people know, like, yo, this person's the guy who, you know, has more guns than the rest of us. This guy's the guy to go to if you want to learn how to use guns. This guy, you know, people can go around and talk about it without it feeling so taboo. I want it to be like, so people know that, you know, communities themselves are defended. They don't have to rely on what we all know about, like, the horrible police system where, like, it may take a half an hour to an hour for police to get there. Like, I want that to be known. That way we don't get instances like, you know, the Buffalo shooting happening where people can plan these things out knowing for a fact that these communities, because of laws, are quite unprotected. Um, I don't think it makes sense, especially for the Black community, having like these things used against us, for us to then be saying that, yo, we need to get rid of them, we need stricter gun laws and yada yada yada, when we know for a fact, as Fanatic mentioned, Isles mentioned, Black American Made mentioned, DeAndre, like, the first people they're gonna come from with this shit, it's probably always gonna be Black people. They did it in the past when, you know, they realized, oh shit, Black people are people and they can practice their Second Amendment, and then we're gonna have to curtail that shit. The moment we start advocating it for it again, they'll take our guns, but this time we'll have been begging them to, if like people take the bullet, that we should, you know, give them up. So in my opinion, just to make it clear, yeah, keep the gun culture alive and well, make it so that it evolves into a community thing, and then, like, yeah, we should definitely not be advocating for stricter gun laws and shit like that.
Yes, you can.
Yeah, so yeah, like I think a lot of y'all said this one is complicated. I got a DM from my brother. We like all got a group where me, him, and his best friend DM, and there was another murder like really close to my hometown, and it was at a party that he was supposed to go to, and some people at the party just start shooting into the crowd and killed somebody. And so I don't take it lightly about like gun violence because that could have been my brother. So um it's always very complicated. And I used to be the person that was like, we definitely should get rid of all guns for a long time. And then like I started to think about it logically rather than emotionally. And then I just arrived at there's no protection, like to what some other people were pointing at, some of the systemic things in America. So we're not going to live in a culture where they're going to try to go take all the guns. That's a civil war, right? That ends in a lot of bloodshed. So I doubt there's going to be legislation that tries to take all guns away. So given that knowledge, the best thing for us to do is try to teach people to be responsible, try to create opportunity in our community that will lead to less gun crime and things like that. Because there's no way short of a civil war of like confiscation of all guns. So, and I think what Pyro said is pretty important. If there is going to be any like when we say common sense gun legislation, it gets weird because a lot of us here they're going to try to disenfranchise Black people from having guns. They're going to mark us as more mentally retarded, or they're going to find ways to like slice like that South Carolina uh, Republican body that made that legislation about voting. They're going to do something like that with gun legislation. They're going to try to target Black people. So for that reason, I openly support guns for sure.
Hey, Water Kai.
This is a subject that I very recently, within the last year or so, changed my mind about because I also felt for my entire life nobody should be needing guns for things in a country where we should have solid police and everything else involved. So you come to a point where you realize we're beyond the point of no return. There's never going to be a point where there's no guns. So you have to expect that people who should not have guns will not follow the law and will have guns. Just like we learned in Japan, one of the most gun stringent countries on the planet, a person made a gun to get the job done. So when you're living in a society like that, you have to have common sense gun laws, and everybody needs to be educated in firearms. So if the Black community were better educated in firearms, we'd have a better, more healthy relationship with firearms. And
Hey, thank you
pretty
so
much
much.
everybody's covered it.
Thank you so much, Antaj. Any second now.
Sorry, I had to. Sorry about that. I had to unmute myself. Yeah. So pretty much with guns, I don't like guns personally, but I think it'd be very foolish of me to say is that we're not that black people, black Americans, aren't one of the most justified people to have guns and own guns in the United States. Like I think for us, like it's just so it's complicated. But I think like gun ownership, especially a gun culture from the black community, is something that's like super justifiable. Like historically speaking, like we probably are very justified to arm ourselves at all times and like know how. Oh, that was someone else. Okay,
keep going.
And know how to like use and operate and fire guns, the same way that these chuds do, if not like more proficiently. So I'm pro guns, I guess.
Okay,
It's a cool dude, Taj.
Since
One of my
all
favorites.
you guys agreed, leave it up to the leftists to show you the way. Okay, all right.
Of course.
Ah.
Here we go.
Leftists love guns. Let me be clear about that, bro.
I'm sure there's
bro,
disagreement if we go
mindfuck.
deeper.
Community speak.
I'm definitely there's disagreement. The first thing I'm going to address is Waterkai's point. Waterkai talking about like what happened in Japan as if that's proof. No, it's like of the opposite, right? It's the exception that proves the rule. So an individual who assassinated Shinzo Abe had to construct a gun, construct it, because gun laws are so tight there they could not get his hands on it. Right, like that's how difficult it is. People always give that excuse. Oh well, then the criminals aren't going to follow the law, so the criminals are going to get their hands on it. Well, go to Japan and try to buy a gun. Do that. Show me, right? Be
You
a
do it
criminal.
after you drop off 40 million there, and then then say that like, okay, now they're illegal, and try to recollect all 40 million. I just use a smaller number for their population size.
But that's a separate thing. That's a separate point. And we can get to that. But like the point being that we can't regulate these things, that they're impossible, I think is something different, right? And then to bring up Japan, but specifically to bring up Japan to say like, oh, that proves something here. No, it proves my point, if anything, because gun regulation, if you did it right, if you're serious about it, actually can work. Okay, but on the other
Japan
side,
is
right,
actually
in
a
terms
really
of
good example
in terms
of
of
this stuff.
Wait a minute, let Brian get his point out.
Yeah, and I'm almost done. In terms of the amount of guns that are here, right? I think like certainly there's a reality that's involved there that it's just unlikely that we would get them off the street, but we can definitely institute programs that could help us out and to reduce these things like a gun buyback programs. But beyond that, right? So that's like the big picture question, right? So I wanted to focus more on the black community, right? And talk about the violence that we see within our community that is only possible with guns, right? Like people are advocating, yeah, we should arm ourselves. Thing is, irresponsible people get their hands on those guns too, right? And we see what happens, right? We see kids out there strapped up, right? And getting upset about some nonsense, right? At a fucking ball game, and then deciding that they got to shoot someone up, right? That people got to die for this shit. So I think like that should affect the way we look at these things. I'm done.
So I would say,
go ahead.
I would say the whole like we did it in Japan, so we can do it in America. I don't necessarily agree with that. Like, it's true that Japan has, I don't know if we want to call it progress, but progressed to the point that they are. But that doesn't mean that like feelings of individual freedom and things like that here in America won't make it go a different route, right? Like, I don't know if the sentiment around gun culture and how most gun-toting Americans feel are like emulated in the Japanese culture. So I think to say that it worked there, so it'll work here is a bit.
I didn't say that.
I thought that's what you said.
No.
Well, you were discounting the fact that people were, or maybe go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was discounting the idea that the fact that the Japanese prime minister was assassinated using a gun, right, like a homemade gun, proves that like then these regulations are impossible and they don't work. Because I think it proves that they do work, right? It's so difficult to get a gun. It's so incredibly difficult that literally guy had to construct it. If you saw like how he did it, like it was like with a board and pipes, and it was like the most crazy fucking thing. But he made it happen, right? That's such a high bar. Most people can't do it. But like I admit, like that's why I brought in the all the other guns, like the fact that our country is so awash with guns. that we can't necessarily do the same things here in the States, right? Because of history and maybe some of the things that you're mentioning as well. So there are other steps we could take if we wanted to limit the presence of guns in our lives.
But yeah, so that's proof that it doesn't work, right? Because you
Yeah.
didn't have guns and the guy was still assassinated with a gun. And yes, and that bar is high, but there's so much easier bars, right? For 3D printers can literally make guns. That's a thing. The
Yeah.
easiest thing in the world. Right now, to buy myself a decent 3D printer, it's like what, $150? Literally, I can get for $150. I can get a 3D printer. I can literally go online and get the schematics for the gun, and my 3D printer will make me the gun. It's
I think you would
not
still
that
have to
hard.
buy. You would still have to figure out how to get a firing pin. But I mean, like the majority of the pieces,
Firing
yeah.
pin. Well, people have been using thumbtacks for
Yeah.
firing in the schematics, so I mean, it's not even that hard.
Oh,
It's
wow.
Like
not hard at
my
all.
thing
Yeah,
is
the
with your
Saturday Night
Japan
Special is a real thing.
example, like when we look at Japan, looking at a completely different culture that has a completely different view on guns. I look at America and I think about it, yo, we do your thing. Let's say we can Thanos snap it. We have the amount of guns down by like 75%. Well, then you have like a highly industrialist country with really active and boisterous people who have these things called the First and Second Amendments, who's going to be like, huh, they took my guns. And the last thing I want them doing is like Fanatic said, going to the 3D prints or even worse, like going to their backyard shed trying to make their own guns, because like we know they will. Like if one nigga in Japan can do it, think about like everybody in Louisiana or Kentucky doing it.
I think a lot of people blow their fucking fingers off.
Oh,
But
they will. They
Well,
will.
I
That will
mean,
stop
look at
them.
Prohibition in back in the 40s. People blew themselves up making bathtub moonshine, but
You'll just have
they're still
motherfuckers
going to do it.
firing like you'll just have motherfuckers firing Fallout guns at you with like two fingers, and it's like, congratulations.
But
so
I think
Played
the
yourself.
biggest and most telling issue is that Japan has some of the strictest gun laws in the world, but Japan didn't get there overnight. They started off being one of the most violent places in the world 100 years ago. But
Yeah, but they was
you
having
take
sword
it,
crime like you.
Well,
yeah,
they
but
during the Meiji
Jap-
period they banned the sword.
yeah, but because Japan, the reason why we carry our sword on the left side is because in Japan, if you walk on the certain side of the sidewalk, you have your sword on the opposite side, so nobody can pull it and kill you with it while you're walking. So, but over here in America, you compare the strictest gun laws with Japan. And the areas that where the majority of the shootings happen in black communities are the strictest gun laws in our nation. So it's
Yeah.
clear that being strict on gun laws don't stop criminals. You can't
I
legislate
would.
that's a dog shit
criminal
point, though.
So
activity, criminal
Pace.
But we always know
That's
they're like
that's a
15 minutes
terrible
from
point.
a
Hold
place
on,
with
wait,
no
wait,
gun laws.
wait,
Like,
wait. Let's talk about that a little bit, Pace. I would say that it's not necessarily the gun laws. I would say that those places historically were red line, had white flight, had a bunch of opportunity leaving, and people in those places have probably been the most emotional about gun laws. So they've made changes, and then it looks like the end result of that is more gun laws create more crime and stuff. But I don't think. I think
No, I'm
that
not saying
the
that more gun laws create more crime. I'm saying that you cannot draw a parallel that says that having a ridiculously high bar for gun regulation will stop that
oh,
because people who want to commit
true,
crime,
because it's not
they
addressing the
will commit,
underlying issue,
right.
right? So I agree
They
with
will
you.
commit crime. But I think another massive issue that we also have to face in there, and I'm not going to get into all the mental behavioral stuff, but another uh big problem that we have is, and particularly in our community, it happens in every community, in any poor community, should I say, is, well, number one, the lack of fatherhood. It's very important that you have a father in the household. Number
What does
two
that got to do with
is
guns?
the
that's what I
lack
was wondering.
of the lack of extracurricular activity, particularly for young people. And any other people, things that you can do outside of work, outside of school that will stop them from getting in trouble. When you have reduced their abilities to go to work, for example, in Chicago, where unemployment for teenagers uh, is, I think, at like 74%, they have nothing but time on their hands to get out there and wind up finding themselves in trouble. You when you eliminate those types of things, you eliminate the need to be involved in instances in which they can get in that type of trouble. And again, what Watercow was talking about was educating ourselves on the uses of firearms, because a lot of people they get a gun and they think it's a toy and they can just go out there waving it around, shooting it like it's just a toy, and they don't I guess they understand the consequences of it, but they don't care to understand the consequences of what that does. When you start shooting guns, somebody else goes and buys a gun because they don't know that their neighbor is going to just start shooting the gun like it's a damn toy the next day. So now they're packing heat to protect themselves from
I think there's some level of like there if we were if again we can't the reason we can't ban all guns is because like I said it will end up in a civil war. But if you feasibly could, like, yes, the guns would be here and it would probably be another problem for the next 5 or 6 decades, like it's like to a pretty similar degree. But basically, as like cost tools to repair guns, like the amount of those go down, the availability of bullets, like people are going to pass them down from generation to generation for a little bit, and then soon like the market rate for them is going to get so high that no one's going to be like doing exchanges on guns. Like if we could ban guns, if we did ban guns, we would eventually buy a majority of them back. But
We should just get that out of our head. Like this country, there's just no way we're banning
Yeah,
guns, bro.
it's not
Like
happening. It's not happening.
it's literally in the fucking like it's one of the second one, right? It's like the right to bear arms and shit. Like we can talk about really strict gun legislation all we want, but the idea of banning guns is just like some idea that I don't even know how it got dropped into the conversation. I'm not going to ascribe that to anyone because Prime was talking about stricter gun legislation. I'm
yeah.
against that. Right. Like I think when we talk about like a lot of the crime and stuff like that, I think DeAndre hit a lot of it and he gave some solutions. We can talk about those, but like I think we have to look at like what the undercurrents are, what causes people to want to do this crime. I think when we look at these communities and when we look at communities where we're talking about a lot of high gun crime, especially in the Black community, I think we can like safely say there's a bunch of things we can say can cause like this level of gun crime. I don't think it's just the fact that there's guns.
Well,
I like that.
the
That's one of the
issue.
things that I'm tired of. Like every time we see something like this happen, whether it be someone shooting up a supermarket, whether it be black on black crime, we always talk about the gun legislation and not what's causing people to, go out and do these pretty heinous things. I know people with guns and they don't do this shit. So what's causing these other people to? And that's what I want to examine.
Well, yeah,
Yep.
the issue is people in real life. Well, the people who have issues with guns don't have issue with with the majority of gun violence. Like people don't have issues with anybody like us getting shot by somebody that looks like us. Like that, no one cares about that thing. Like that's just two hoodlums going at it. The type of violence they care about is the stuff we see on TV with the mass shootings, like the school shootings and things that are a lot harder to catch and are a lot more fringe in nature. So I think
Mhm.
that's the difficult part about it. That we could probably find better solutions, like solving. All the real solution is obviously poverty. I feel like everybody's sort of leaned
Yeah,
around the nose
UBI
of
and
that.
NGA. Yeah, dope.
But
Yeah,
but
no,
but I'm saying like as far as like the way that like the type of solutions that have like the issues that are backed at least culturally have nothing to do with the type of violence that's affecting the Black community. Nobody cares about Black people dying by gun violence.
I feel that's more
They
affected by
don't.
Black people and who they're choosing to prop up as their leaders. I mean, we had an opportunity. Well, I don't like the organization Black Lives Matter, but we can't say that we didn't have an opportunity to put spotlights on what's happening in these communities. But instead, the leaders of the Black community, they only show up when it's a police officer attacking a Black person or it's a Black
That's what that
person shooting a
organization
white
is.
person.
No, yeah,
They never any of the money
Wait,
that's
that's
donated to
literally
them,
not true.
they never donate any of that money to the inner cities to help out anybody. So if we have opportunities, but we have to change the leadership in the Black community to get away from these people that are only focusing on using Black lives to prop up themselves, as opposed to actually doing some decent uh, uh, progress within our community.
So one, I don't even think that's true, and two, like that doesn't attack the thing. Like if we can all agree, like this is a poverty issue, like I can think of like 110 organizations off the back right now in my city, Buffalo, New York, that like do things to help, like the inner city, the Black Belt, Mastern District, all of these like predominantly Black communities. Yet they're still fucking poor as shit. Yet like people are still being like forced to move out because like shit's going wrong. Like we're in a fucking recession and no one's mentioned that, and like people can't afford shit, right? Like So like when we talk about like what's causing these issues, I don't think it's solely a leadership issue. I think there are
No,
things
I'm not talking
intrinsically.
about the poverty part. I was saying in relation to Bam talking about nobody cares about Black lives. It's because of how the leadership doesn't focus on the lives. We tell them, oh, we got
That's
to
not
report
BLM's. That's not BLM's.
all
Like
this
that's not what their
crime.
organization is. Like there's plenty of organizations that do follow
Yeah,
focus on those things, but
I
BLM
was gonna say
chose
like
a
that's
very
but
specific
if
thing.
we're talking about like organizations and shit that care about Black lives and people not caring about Black lives, I'm just gonna disagree with that. I think plenty of people care about Black lives. I just don't think the people in power care about Black lives.
Let's go to
That's what I'm
absolutely.
Fanatic.
talking about.
Let's
The
go to
people in power.
let's go to Fanatic and then Taj. Okay.
Yeah. So like one obviously that's just categorically not true, right? Like we see how much like there's so many organizations out there that like whose whole job and sole goal is just to make sure that children are well fed and things like that. So like yes, people do care about Black lives. Furthermore, Black Lives Matter, that wasn't like that organization is an individual organization. How many things have been in existence before then? The NAACP, like Lord, I'm not listing off anything. I don't need to. We know that people do care about Black lives. Like that is a thing that people do focus on. I think one of the biggest problems is that like whenever we focus on Black issues, those Black issues are always downplayed. They pretty much ignore them whenever we're bringing them up. So that to me is I think what the primary problem is. And then I would say also that the reason why Black gun ownership is so incredibly important is because of the fact that we are like the largest majority of recipient of hate crimes in this country. We make up close to 45% of all of the hate crimes in this country, despite the fact that we're 13% of the population. If that's not OD disproportionate, I don't know what the freak to tell you. In fact, since we're talking about hate crimes, because I just brought that up, let's talk about the fact that Asian Americans literally make up 1/10 the amount of hate crimes that we do. Right, for every hate crime that an Asian American experiences, there are 10 against Black people. Yet we refuse to do any common sense bills that would make anti-Black, that would focus on anti-Black racism, but we're instead talking about anti-Asian hate crimes, right? And again, gun ownership is perfectly fine for a lot of people until we start looking at the fact that until Black people own them, and then they try to justify this by talking about the fact they're like, oh yeah, well, too many mass shootings and things and stuff for Black people and blah 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 blah. But they ignore that fact. They ignore the fact that they've redefined mass shootings, right, to like mean because the type of mass shooting that a Black person typically gets involved in is based off of like a response to some sort of physical or verbal or some sort of altercation in which a person is like being violent, right? In what are like unsafe, poverty-stricken neighborhoods, right? But what they won't talk about like are those are not the same things as people indiscriminately firing at like random schools and whatever because they feel like their privilege isn't kicking in the way that they wanted it to. So we're not experiencing the same thing, and I think it's absolutely absurd that we even draw those comparisons. Like gun issues facing Black people are like, yes, there is violent in the Black neighborhoods and all of that's poverty driven. And then the gun stuff that's happening from white people is just, just random nonsense that doesn't make any sense that you can't even justify. It's like, why did this dude do? And all they can do is say, well, it's a lone wolf. It didn't make any sense. No one understands it. Just kind of move past it and we'll just, pretend it didn't happen.
That's our friend Taj.
Yeah. All right. So what I wanted to point out is that violence is really hard to cure, but there's some things that I really feel like are kind of common sense on how to prevent violence. You're right. Like not Fanatic, my bad. Well, Fanatic's right on a lot of shit too, but Prime, you're right when you're talking about like there are gun laws that we can implement that would prevent gun violence. I think that making it harder to access, of course, like if there are more hurdles to achieving a gun or obtaining a gun, of course there's gonna be less shootings, right? But I think there are other things like environmental fixes that we should probably implement too to lower the amount of like violence or the desire to commit violence at all. Things like when I say like environmental fixes, I mean like better job access. I mean things like higher access to mental health and a destigmatization of mental health as well. I think that like it's like multifaceted and there are multiple levels of curing the epidemic of gun violence out there, and we need to like actually scratch that surface versus just kind of being like surface level thing, executive order. I think there's like a lot of shit that we should probably like take into account and take care of.
Go ahead, you go first, Pyre.
Oh no, I was just gonna be like what? Like I was expecting more to the statement. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, I was being very broad.
I
Do you mean
was
like
getting
gun?
on
Do you mean gun
board,
laws?
like,
Do you mean?
Like you were saying, like
Yeah.
we need to go a bit deeper than like surface level like political action, like legislation and shit, and like we need to. And I'm waiting. I was like, okay, cool. He's got something in the tank. I'm ready for him to fire. And then it just kind of cut off.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
sorry about that. I was being
something-
pretty broad. Did you mean like gun laws in general, or like
Shoot,
violence
anything.
prevention?
Go ahead.
Type thing? Yeah, like I think that common sense gun laws, like a waiting period, access to gun lockers, like say public gun lockers that say like at like a USPS or something like that, or like a not a library, but maybe like a post office or something like that. Like people can have like destigmatized gun lockers, or like, hey, I'm having like a mental health episode. I probably shouldn't have a gun around me. Can I like store this gun here for free for dirt cheap, and just keep it there like that? A lot of people have like warning signs like that. I think that having a easier access to, I'd go so far as in like an easier access to like gun classes, gun safety courses. I think that like even subsidizing gun lockers, like interpersonal ones, where like say, oh, I don't want my 4-year-old to like get access to my rifle or my handgun, that people can access that don't cost an arm and a leg. I think that when I talk about environmental factors, like I mean like better schools, I mean better access to healthcare, better access to jobs, better access to things like food. I think there's a study out there that shows that like school fights, like literally kids like fighting each other in school is less likely when all these kids are fed adequately.
Yeah,
When I
nutrition
talk
and
about environmental
nutrition
factors,
shit,
it
for
is
sure.
so widespread.
Itis.
Yeah, man, like being y'all ever been like really mad and you're hungry and shit? Like that'll make someone fucking mad. Especially kids have to be at school at fucking 7:14 a.m. every day. Like of course there are gonna be more fights during the morning when these kids aren't fed adequately. So I think that when we address these things, there's just gonna be an automatic like lowering in violence, whether it be gun violence or otherwise. As far as mass shootings, I think that a lot of these mass shootings, especially the white supremacist ones, I think it's based off of irrational fear and an unfamiliarity with the other, which is like black people, Asian people, Hispanic people. I think that if we had better access to like people of different cultures within our own borders, within America, if we had like better access to mental health, once again, mental health, I think a lot of these like mass shooting sprees probably could be prevented, or they'll just be like less likely to happen.
Something that I noticed the Olympics, that both the summer games and the winter games have events from marksmanship. But when you see like these events, a lot of white people, there's not a lot of black people. Maybe, to enhance, the African American community's relationship with guns, we can start training marksmanship, and that way we can have a patriotic, let's send our people from the inner cities to the Olympics and show them how good they are at marksmanship. And I think that'd be good for us. I want to know what you guys think about that.
That's great. I actually know a
I
man
think that
named
our
Nick
sourcing
Bezel.
should. Oh,
I know a man named Nick Bezel that runs the Geronimo Pratt Gun Club, and he's teaching common sense gun safety to the community, well, to the black community, and has been doing it for some time. I say look into him.
Yeah, there's a really great organization called Black Guns Matter, and that organization, like their whole focus is on specifically educating. I follow them on Twitter, have been for a little bit. It's about educating Black folks about like what their gun rights are and like what responsible gun ownership and things like that are. And I think those things make a lot of sense. I do think that the more responsible you make people with guns, then I think it encourages better behavior. It makes people I think that when people have access to guns and you know that they have more access to guns, I think that could actually decrease a lot of violence where people are trying to do violent actions like I'm just trying to rob a nigga, because now you actually have to start considering
Everyone knows the community's armed, bro.
that's right. There might be some negative ramifications if I try to run up on this nigga. I might run up and get done up.
It's anecdote time on the ABE, but like I remember growing up, I lived in like a kind of violent neighborhood, and like the one thing that kind of stopped motherfuckers from shooting up my grandmother's house, and like she's this 4'6" tall, like 72-year-old black lady, and it's the fact that my uncle, like some fucking ancient knight, bequeathed upon her a fucking Tommy gun. So like that's what
Jesus.
that's what she slept with, because like, she decided old lady, she slept on the couch in the living room while like the rest of the family like filled out the house. And like one day someone fucked around and they found out. And it took one sight of this old lady with a fucking Tommy gun just pointed right at them, like, you know what? We not gonna mess with, Mrs. Tyrant, because like she don't fuck around. She really don't fuck around. So I can personally say, like, having, a gun in the house and people knowing that, like, that house is kind of defended, that's it, off target, that's not like an easy target. It does help. It does help. But like I also like a lot of what I'm hearing about like community training and shit. And like that's what I like hitting at in the beginning, like the community training and shit. And then Taj John going into like a lot of the environmental factors, because like that's what I think like that's what I'm personally like, seeing a lot of environmental factors and shit like going into like the type of crime we see. And it's not just black crime. You get into big metropolitan areas, a lot of, low income areas that aren't really paid attention to by, a lot of your city governments and shit see this type of crime and shit like that. So it's like something I'd really be interested in seeing. Like, we fix these issues. Let's see what happens to gun crime. I don't know
think
about
we-
like fucking
I think we
shit,
need
though.
to well that's what Japan does, I think, pretty normally. And there's a lot of like college campuses that like if there's students who keep guns, and then like you can keep them at the police station until you want to check them out for like sport and stuff like that. But
You notice how we won the war and they didn't, though?
I think another factor that
We had nukes, man.
Yeah,
You
I think
notice how they don't have
Why
a
would you
military and we
say
still
that?
do? Like, I mean, like, cause like we keep comparing ourselves to Japan, so like that's what we're gonna do, right? We're gonna compare ourselves to like the one nation that like relies on us. They have a defense force. They don't even have their own military. Like, no shit, they don't have guns, bro. We occupied them for
They
damn
do
near
have their
50
own fucking military. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. They absolutely do have their own military.
They
In
have
fact,
the defense
It's
task
three
force
niggas.
and
Let's-
shit.
hey, hold on,
self-defense act
hold on,
was
wait,
imposed
wait,
upon them,
Prime,
and one of them
now
a
they're
black
trying
belt.
to,
They got
we can
task-
agree.
They got
We can just
self-defense
all
task
agree that
force.
Pyro won that, right? We don't like
Like,
it's
It's
like,
okay.
if-
Yeah, don't
if-
leftist it up, Prime. It's
if we
okay.
can, like,
It'll
if
be
we gonna
based
make
on
ourselves to a comparison,
Nothing
let's
ever
not compare.
compares to Japan
Like,
again. It's
like, let's not make the comparison to the only country on earth that had like nuclear weapon. Like, come on, you guys, we could make better
What-
comparisons.
but it has
than
nothing to do with anything. Okay, I'm just leave it alone. All right, I'm leaving it alone. I'm leaving it
Wait,
alone.
wait.
Thank
I
you.
just wanted to finish my point.
Thank you. Let him
Okay,
win.
Bam, go, and
Let me-
then after that, Issue who was trying to break in.
Yeah, like I think the one statistic, and this is gonna sound like a joke, but I'm so serious, that can't be put on can't be put on paper, is I feel like we need to re-normalize ass whoopings. Sometimes,
For sure.
like I'm
Yes.
talking about, like this is legitimately like Friday. You win some, you lose some,
Yes.
but you live.
If
You
you're
live
talking
to fight
about,
it.
okay.
if you're talking
Nobody-
about renormalizing shit, I'm not even gonna get on the ass whoopings because
Nah.
that's a separate
I'm
topic. for the
anti-ass
panel.
No, I'm not talking.
Like-
I'm not talking about your.
No.
I'm not talking about parents whoop. I'm talking about like
Yeah, I
fight.
thought you meant parents.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
no. I'm
people
talking.
should
Well,
throw
yeah,
hands.
parents do better too. But like,
You're talking about
I hear people
communal
say
ass
Oh,
every. Yeah.
I know what Bam. He's talking about legalized fisticuffs. I get it.
Yeah,
Like, you
get the
get two
ones.
niggas, they get upset and they get into a ring and they fucking fight each other with fists. I get that. Cool. I'm good with that.
But sure, I've
think we
heard.
need-
Hold
I
on a
need-
second.
Oh, sorry.
Hold
Go
on a
ahead.
second. I'm just saying, because I've even heard like, I deal with a lot of children all the time, but like I've even heard 16-year-olds, like young kids, say like, "Oh, okay, ain't no fair ones. I ain't throwing no hands. I ain't
Yeah.
gonna throw no punch." Like, so that's what happens whenever if they feel like okay, it's a situation. Now it is do or die, and it ain't always gotta be that way. Sometimes you
Yeah.
can get beat up and go home. You know, your mama ask what happened to you. You say, "Oh, it is what it is." Like that, that has to be. We have to say it's okay to throw punches sometimes.
No. See, the
Yeah,
problem with
for
that,
sure.
the
Bruh,
the
when was the last
problem
time
with
y'all got
no,
your
no.
asses kicked?
See, the problem with that, Bam, is exactly what Taj. Some nigga get his ass kicked in the most embarrassing way because he got punched in the face. He went down, tried to get back up, and then he got kneed in the head again. And now it's like embarrassing. It's all over YouTube. And then he gonna be like, you know what? Let me get
Bruh.
like we already know that like that's the thing, motherfucker. Motherfuckers lose fights, and what's the next
Run
thing
to
they
the top.
do, bro?
Yeah.
Man, I
You
lost
know
that fight. Let me
so-
pull out the gun. Like,
Wait,
we
It ain't just if he
already know.
loses a fight. He has to lose that fight in front of a woman. That's
I'm
what it
thinking, like,
is.
the last
It's
You
time
lose
not
fights
even
in
that,
front of
bro.
girls, and that's
It's
when the
not-
violence
it's not
happens.
even
Wait,
that.
but I
Watch
do
how
think-
niggas lose
I do
fights
think-
in this- Go ahead.
Pyro, I do think one of the things you said is important though. Like used to when people got beat up, it was like the immediate people that were there talked about it. You know, niggas joked the next like week at school. But then it was like over. But now that shit's
It
on
is
YouTube with
viral.
like a
Yeah.
million views. Now niggas like, all right, I can't.
It don't even
Well,
wait,
star.
let me not let me drop the hyperbole because I know there's gonna be some motherfucker in chat, right? It don't even have to be like world star viral. It go viral in the worst place it can in high school,
In the
around
community.
the fucking high school. Like that's the worst thing that could happen to a motherfucker. I can understand that. And then you get motherfuckers in your community. It's like, yo, you lost that fight. You lost that fight to Tyreek No Legs. He can't fight, bro. What you do? Like
Every
why
time
you
somebody
do it like
giggling
that?
at their phone, you think they looking at the video. They could be looking at TikTok. I mean, but if they giggling at their phone, what's the problem? Ain't nothing funny. Like, oh my
Yep.
But
goodness.
Bam hit me on something because I think we do need to reintroduce something. I think we need to introduce like actual safety gun courses and shit. Like motherfuckers who will come in, teach you how to put together a gun, teach you how to properly, use a gun, and show you that like yes, this is a tool. It's a part of America. We have more guns than we have fucking people. It's something that's out there. You should probably know about this thing.
Uh,
You should probably know how to use one of these
let's
things.
let
That way we
in
get
let's
motherfuckers
let's
that
let
know
in
safety.
GSU.
Yeah. No, I can't remember what I was about to say earlier. I think I was gonna piggyback on something that Todd said about how like the way that we try to push gun legislation around mental health like causes people to like seek less help because there's this perceived like loss of substantive rights. But the other thing I was gonna say, dang, that was more important to it. I can't remember right now, but it was something based off of what Todd said that I wanted to go into, but I can't.
Okay, well, I got something for us real
Was
quick.
it like when was the last time y'all got your asses kicked?
No.
That was something before that. It was you talking
So I
about
got
that.
something
Okay,
for us
I
real
remember the
quick.
last time I
Let's
got my
talk
ass
about the
kicked. I've
fact.
never wanted to shoot somebody execution. Oh, sorry about that.
Oh, yeah,
Sorry
real
about
quick.
that. I was just talking.
So you know that like they just did a poll and they said that 50% of the country believes that we are headed for a civil war, right?
Yeah, I've heard about that. Yeah.
Okay. What of the 50% that believe that, what who do you guys think that sort of belief is centered around?
Fragile white egos that realize they're being treated like the minorities in this country.
They're not being treated. They still got privilege. But yes,
No, they're
that's
catching a
their
taste of it.
but
Just
they
the
are.
taste
They're
is bad enough for them to freak out.
literally half of a taste, and it's too much. So those like that's a thing, right? Like these alt-righters, like they believe that we're headed for a civil war. And I think Donald Trump getting 4 more years in office might have actually led us there. Being 100% honest, that was a genuine fear of mine. That nigga was gonna really try to dismantle our democracy. But it's a scary thing to me because while it's like, yeah, you got niggas in the hood, right? Like that might have access to guns and so on and so forth. George Zimmerman is still alive. Number one. I'm not advocating or recommending anybody off him. That's not what I'm doing at all. I'm just saying that when gross violations are happening, it seems like people aren't as quick to act as we would like them to be, or as maybe they claim that they would be otherwise. So if that's the case, then I think there's reason to be able to say like black gun ownership absolutely is essential, considering the fact that it seems like we're becoming more. There's mosquito here and it's pissing me off. Jesus, that we're becoming more and more divisive. Like the country has become, I'm sorry, more and more divided as a country, and it seems like that is something that could actually happen. While I'm not a person that would ever advocate for a civil war of any kind, it does seem like it's a founded idea that it's something that could occur. So then it's like, what are we going to do in those kinds of situations? Like we can't rely on the police officers. They would probably be on the side of the people who would initiate the civil war, right? We've seen how much white supremacy has infiltrated our police force. So then it's like, what are we really going to do? So to me, it seems like it's like almost like a no-brainer. Like, yes, there should be some sort of like a better culture around guns with black people in particular.
Wait, hold on. Am I the only person on this panel with the Operation Haul Ass already in mind? Like, I already know what I'm doing. I already thought about that shit. Like, I got the escape route already planned. Like, am I the only person here?
Going to my granddad. I'm be honest
Were you
with
trying to flee to
I'm
Mexico
in
or
the middle of
Canada,
the
or what
country.
are you thinking
I'm
is?
Bro, I'm right on the border. It's called like, a few steps beforehand. I already know my personal steps. Like, I'm just gonna be like, yo, Grammy, you know what? Get your ass back up here. Bring the sisters too. Bring everybody. It's gonna be a big ass family reunion, 6-month family reunion. And then we hauling ass to Canada. Like, I don't know what you fucking thought. Like, bruh, no. I already know I can't rely on shit in this country, bruh.
You know, when I take a look and and I sit back and
I'm
listen to all
fucked.
this stuff, I think a lot of the problems that we have in here in our community comes from environmental factors. But I think the most important environmental factor that's affecting our community is the media in which we consume. Dr. Thomas Sowell years ago, when he was writing Discrimination and Disparities and Race, Intellectuals and Race, Walter Williams, when he wrote on economics and race, how much can discrimination explain, uh, talked a lot about the subculture that exists within our community, that the media has championed that subculture and has made it the dominant culture for Black Americans. When in reality, that culture is a culture that comes from white people. It died off with white people when they realized it wasn't working for them because they uh the rednecks from the South were coming up into white and Black neighborhoods in the North, and they were getting kicked out because nobody wanted to deal with them because they were violent, they were illiterate, they were ignorant what was going on, and they were bringing down the community. But for some reason, our community continues to hold on to this culture that has done no other culture any good. And when they compared studies, Professor
Wait, can
Flynn,
you define the
it's,
culture? What culture?
it's called Black. Thomas Sowell refers to it as Black redneck culture, which is a culture that came out of the South and
Describe
followed
the
us
culture.
to the
What does
North.
that culture embody?
What
What
is
does that
black
mean?
redneck culture?
Well, Black redneck culture is a culture that originally started in poor Scotland and poor Ireland that followed with the white people over here, and everything that we
No,
do in
but
our
he's
culture
asking you what
Down.
characteristics do these people
the
give us something
characteristics of
about the behavior.
the characteristics of them are they're unnecessarily loud. They are usually ignorant of law. They're usually uncultured. They're very economically uninformed. I won't call them economically poor because some of them make a lot of money, but they're misinformed on how to use their finances properly and wind up in a lot more financial jams. And the culture that the white rednecks were extremely violent people, and that culture
Mm.
has bleeded into Black culture, and that's what Thomas Sowell calls Black redneck culture, because we grew up in the same culture down here in the South, and the majority of Blacks who are in the North started off down here in the South. And when we started going up there to the North, for some reason, we just held on to that culture, whereas the other Blacks are already in the North, that had fled the South much earlier. That culture died off a long time ago, and it
So
started creating a lot more problems within Black communities in the North during the 60s and 70s because of the culture from the South coming up there and mucking up the waters.
I don't want to do this too much, but let me just make sure that we get this crystal clear here. So you said it started out in poor Ireland and poor Scotland.
Yes.
Do you think that the culture that you're referring to could just be a culture of poverty?
No, because the exact same study. When I did a study on this, they compared blacks who grew up under the same living conditions to blacks in Germany living under the same living conditions. The difference was the Germans did
Wait,
not have this black subculture that we have in America, and the blacks over there grew up with a completely different set of
wait, but why not
morality.
compare blacks in the North and in the South? Why take a whole different company? I mean,
Country.
Because you have to
countries got customs.
when you're making that comparison, you have to get rid of external factors. So you're
Like what?
comparing
But
blacks
you're
that
Wait,
saying
wait,
had
wait,
you're
wait, wait.
saying blacks in the
Wait.
North
What's a
don't.
greater external factor than the
the
country that
Yeah.
you live
control
in?
group. See, the thing is when you're dealing with statistics, you have to have a control group. The control group
There's
in
no way to
statistics
control
in
in
this
two different countries.
is
No way.
no, that's not how you do a control group. When you do a control group, your control group is if you believe that the culture is what's causing the problem, you compare uh, places where the culture does not exist to the place where the culture does exist.
Are there any
And
places
So
in the country
wait.
that they could have compared?
Well, like if we're gonna do
yes,
that, if we're
they
gonna
did. He had compared that. He compared it beforehand, which he did write in his book, comparing the culture of Black Northerners in the 1920s and 30s to the Black Southerners, and it was completely different, almost the exact same comparison to blacks that grew up
Yeah,
in
so
Germany.
use that reference. Don't use something in Germany. That's way too.
I'm just
yeah,
I'm all I'm
and if you're
quoting
gonna,
is the exact study.
I mean,
Well,
like that
if the
seems like a
study went
flaw
to
to
that, I don't
just
know why
test
they would do
it.
that. Right.
Yeah,
Like,
like
that sounds
if you're gonna use a
ridiculous.
control group, like the first thing I would jump to is like some like, and I don't even know what country, but like I'd pick a country in Africa where it's like, that has the least external force put on it from any other country. I wouldn't jump to like another country like, Germany or some country in Europe. I'd jump like to the closest I can get to like the
It's
less externally fucked with.
comparing a country in Africa to a country that's in the Western world. It's not even comparing apples to apples. The rest of the reason why you would compare them to another place that has a significant black population in the Western civilization. Africa is not a Western civilization country, and at the time, and still at the time presently, Africa had a whole bunch of warring and strife in the majority black areas, so that would be a poor comparison to
I
use.
got you. It does sound like it's a poor. It does sound like if the origin of the place that they're talking about came from poverty-stricken Ireland people, right? Like, there still is North and South Ireland, right? And like as it stands now, and if you think about it, and you had like Southern Ireland people who
You
were
mean the
like
Republic
more
of Ireland?
huh?
There's Northern Ireland and a Republic of Ireland. I don't think
Yes.
they call it South Ireland, but okay, go ahead.
Well, yes, right, sure, whatever. I just know that the North Ireland is the one that's part of the UK, and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
other part is not.
Sure.
So if you already have this division of these two places, but you're able to see the same thing that you're talking about, right? If you're looking and you're seeing that this is a problem that you're saying that white people had when they were in poverty, and you had other white people had when they were in poverty, and now you have black people have this same thing that are in poverty, then it seems like maybe the focus here would probably be on that thing, the not just the poverty, but like the fact that yeah, it seems like that obviously then the
No, no,
problem is the
you
poverty.
compare the culture. For example, in places like Germany, in places like Southern Ireland, there is no culture of media that is prompting up uh this level of violence in the community. When you take a look at the stuff that we consume on our media,
No.
where
Why did that
where
culture
we
exist
have
in Southern Ireland? I mean, why did that thing exist in Ireland then if they didn't have the media?
the thing is they existed because they were fighting, but now
But
when
yeah,
you
why? Why
when
did it
you are
start there? Why did it start there? If it
when
didn't start because of media, then you can't say that media is the
when you
cause of
are
it. If it existed in the places that didn't have that media.
when you are excluding and these factors, because when we compare similar peoples in similar positions in different places, the people here grew up with a culture that perpetuates violence. The people in Germany that were black grew up in a culture where there was no people that was rapping and singing about gang banging and
Okay,
drugging and
so
sex
yeah,
parties and all
that stuff didn't exist in Ireland
that
ever. That stuff didn't exist in Ireland ever, and the culture existed there. That stuff didn't exist in Scotland
that
ever,
culture
and that stuff
existed
existed there.
in
So if you're saying
that
that if you're
existed
saying
in
that the cause
Ireland
of this thing
and
are these
Scotland.
things that exist in black culture that did not exist there, and it seems like these things
Scotland did
developed there,
have
then
a
it
problem
seems
with
like
that.
to try to blame the culture, that to try to blame it on their music, as if their music is the problem, right? Like I
It's
think
not
that
the
sounds
music. It's
ridiculous. It
the
seems
music
to
isn't the
me like we
problem.
can
The problem
obviously
is the
look at
message of the
a
music.
middle class black people, and we can see within a middle class black people that there's almost like a complete cessation of all of these issues: the destruction of the family, the higher dropout rates of education, the higher drug usage, the gang violence. All of these things tend to disappear when we control for specifically middle and upper class black people. But we do see these problems when you have this really low socioeconomic status. So it seems like any person with a brain can obviously see that the cause of these things is not just the fact that they're black. It's not any of those other things. It's the fact that we it's the yeah, it's the fact that we have obviously poverty, and poverty has obviously pays in dividends, and that's what's leading these issues. I think anyone can see
If
that.
you believe that there's a mental aspect to what happens in these communities, the most particular issue in mental health is you are what you consume. If you consume negativity, if you consume things that's all about the violence and destruction of your
But
community, that is what you will perpetuate.
hold on,
If you grow up in that type of
hold on,
community, that is
Deidre.
what you will
I want to ask you a
perpetuate in
question.
your community.
I want to ask you a question because I think
Wait,
you didn't
DeAndre,
answer
even if we
what's
were to grant
fundamental.
that,
Hold on. I think you didn't answer what was fundamental to Fanatic's point. If you look at affluent black neighborhoods that consume the same media, that exist in the same like media space, I mean, consume the same music, exist in the same media space, but you don't see those outcomes. Why don't you think is more material to that problem that it's the poverty rather than all of those other things about culture?
black affluent neighborhoods do not have the same culture as the culture of poor rednecks
Wait,
in
you
the
don't
South.
think black
They don't.
affluent
They don't have.
neighborhoods consume rap and the things that you
Well,
listed off? Which
the
things that
thing
you
is,
listed off do you think don't exist in black affluent neighborhoods or
the
black
thing
affluent
is
people?
what I'm saying is that
He's not going to answer the
in
question.
our
He's not
community,
going to answer the question.
if
Re-ask
you
the
go
question.
to a black affluent neighborhood, you are not going to see black people running around brandishing arms,
Re-ask him the question. He's not answering it. Re-ask him the question.
championing this type of behavior. You go into any poor inner city community, and what you see out on the streets,
Why was poor
everybody's
such an operative word in everything that you just said? You're like giving the solution, but then you're like running away from it. What's
what
happening?
what I'm saying is they is that they are not promoting that type of behavior in their community. That's why their community
Okay.
stays
So he's
affluent.
not going to engage.
They're
We
not
just
like
move
that.
on.
They're not
We
like
are
that because they're
promoting.
not poor.
It has nothing to do with
Yeah, hold on,
poverty
hold on,
because it's
DeAndre,
the
hold on.
exact same.
I want to make sure we're
He won't
connected,
answer
right?
your questions.
You
He's not
you
engaging.
listed hip hop music, which is consumed by both of those communities. You listed the media that we see on TV, which is consumed by both of those communities. But you listed those things as causal factors to the effect, which is people running around brandishing guns. When I asked you the question on which is more important, you talked about the effects, but I want you to talk about the causes, like you were talking about earlier. So the causes in poor black communities you listed as the rap music and the media that perpetuates violence, which is consumed by even black affluent neighborhoods. So I'm asking you, if both of those things are consumed by black affluent neighborhoods, why do you make it a causal factor when it comes to poor black people, but then you say it doesn't matter in black affluent neighborhoods?
As I said before, I was saying that black affluent neighborhoods, same thing with white affluent neighborhoods, they do not perpetuate the same behavior style as in neighborhoods that are
Yeah, the
not.
question was why.
Well,
Yeah, you're talking about effects.
He won't
well,
answer the
So
question. It's
I'm
just still
asking you about
why
causes.
the reason why is because it's a different structure of their environment. When you look at a less affluent black neighborhood, for example, what's that? What is that noise?
Yeah, there's like a
Is
little.
that is that my is that my is that mine?
Taj, I think it's you. Try. Can you mute yourself?
I
I
was
don't.
trying to make sure that my
It's
headphone wasn't
mine.
messed up.
Oh, what the fuck? All right, sorry about that.
No problem.
Yeah, Todd, you're a little bit delayed. I don't
My
know
thing's
if
not
Yeah.
registered as.
Oh, wait a minute. No,
Well,
it's not Taj.
I thought it was mine, but
No, it's not. It is yours. It's yours. Pace
is it
actually.
mine?
Yeah, it's Pace.
Where's it from? Let me see. Let me fix that.
Okay.
Yeah. Can I just sum this up really quickly? It seems like we're asking over and over again, why is it if you're saying these factors cause it, but these factors are present here and there's not this thing. Why is this thing happening? I mean, so how is that thing the cause? And then you just you loop back to they're not promoting these things. They're not encouraging this behavior. And we're saying, well, you're saying the way that they're encouraging the behavior is by the media, which is consumed in both, and so on and so forth. So why isn't it present? And then you just go back again and say, well, because they're not encouraging the behavior. So I don't. It's like we're just looping on some nonsense. It seems like I think it makes all the sense in the world that the problem here is poverty. I don't know why he just has a hard time admitting to that. But if he's not going to answer that question, because again, the very simple question is, because you said earlier it was the media, right? Like things like their music and things like that. But that type of media is consumed by both rich and poor black people. Why isn't it having the same impact? So let's talk about music. Since media can be so many things, let's just talk specifically about music. You're saying the music is contributing to the poverty issue. I'm sorry, the non-poverty issues, to the issues that are happening to poor black people in that community, right? The music is contributing to it. But the
At the
music
time of
is
the study, yes,
okay.
because at the
I
time of
got
the
you. I got you. I
study,
got you. I
we
got you.
didn't have
So the question,
this type of
the
music in
question
our
that I'm
community.
finishing is: if the music is there for the rich blacks as well, why isn't it having the same outcome? Answer that, please.
Well, you are starting to see that when we're starting to see the degeneration of affluent black neighborhoods, and you're starting to see more affluent black people move into affluent white neighborhoods instead of staying in affluent black
But
neighborhoods like
affluent
they
white
did before.
neighborhoods consume rap music too.
Wait, you're saying
Not to
that
the same.
Whoa,
Not
whoa.
to the
Bottom
same
you're
degree.
line,
seeing a
rap
statistic
music is the
that
number
that
one
affluent
music
black
on the
You want to
planet.
look at who
Everyone.
sells the
I'm agree.
who buys the most black rap music,
The problem,
even
Everyone's
violent.
buying it.
Wait,
Everyone
make him answer
consumes
what he
rap
just
music,
said.
bro. It's number one
the,
on the charts.
the
Like,
problem is when you look in our community, I have never been able to walk in a black home here in the South without seeing somebody trying to set up a music shop in their home to get into the music industry, and they
Right.
think that to
You've
do
never
that
met.
you have
Ooh.
to you have to uh follow a certain set of rules and rap a certain way in order to get there. And I actually get people giving me excuses saying that, well, black people have to go to these record producers that will only allow them to sing certain types of music when they can go to any other record producer instead of perpetuating stuff that, according to
But
them,
you
that
can't
they
say
think is
any
Fanatic
good.
does
other
music.
record producer.
Fanatic's
If
not in the
people are
South, but
saying
Fanatic
that,
does music. And I don't think. Do you talk about killing
Talk about
niggas, Fanatic?
No, I don't. I actually have made it like a personal goal of mine because of my faith, and I think that my music came as a gift from God. So I decided I would never ever do like that kind of music. My brother has connections to all of the people on the West Coast. Just literally sat in a room with Dr. Dre, sat in a room with Sugar Free and DJ Quick. Knows them people, knows their phone numbers, and he's always bragged like, "Yo, my brother's a ridiculous producer." But I always told him like, if I truly believe that. God gave me this gift, then it's not going to be something where I'm just going to sit here and say, well, it's okay. I'll go ahead and do music that's violent and things of nature. But just to be clear, like all of the big major labels during the gangster rap era of the 90s, all of those major labels were owned by by white people. Even the ones that like were offshoot labels, where like there were black people that were doing the music, they still had publishing or distribution through white labels, and or there would be sub labels of the white powerful labels. So there's never been this thing where it's just like, oh no, you can just do music the way you want to, and it won't be an issue. That has never existed in the history of black music.
what what I'm saying is you could always go to a different label. You could use a lesser
There,
known
there
label.
was not a single. What I just said
Malibu.
was, I'm sorry, you missed it. There wasn't a single label, major label, that wasn't white. Not one in the history of the music
It's not
industry.
about whether the label is white or not. It's about whether or not the label will allow you to produce music that follows your values. As whereas people are saying that the record labels that they're using only want you to sing things that are detrimental to the
There
community.
were no major labels that weren't doing that.
Malico records,
Almost all of, like literally
Stack
all of the
records,
gangster rap of the 90s, all of the major artists went through 3 different labels because there's only
and that's what I'm
three
saying.
major labels. I'm
There are
sorry.
more
No, no,
labels
no.
that
I'm
you can go
sorry.
to.
They went through 3 because there are only 3 major labels. I'm sorry if you're uneducated about the music
You can go to other
industry.
labels.
There were
You don't have
only
to go
3.
to those
There
3.
are only. I'm sorry. There are only
Sony.
3 major music labels, and all 3 of them are white owned. There does not exist one of the major music labels that's not white owned. I mean, yes, there doesn't exist. So saying they could go to other labels just displays your ignorance to the music industry because those labels did not exist. Did
So
not, do not
they can't
exist.
go to
So if you look
Malico.
at
They
someone
can't go to
like
Peacock
Kanye
or
West
Stax
talking
Records.
about Lucian Grange signs my checks, right? It's because of the fact that Lucian Grange was one of the bigger people over one of the major labels. So it didn't exist. There wasn't that option. You could not do it. It's not a thing. You're
So
making that up. You just don't know the industry.
you saying they couldn't go to
Jethro's
Stax,
not a major label.
Peacock
Little
Records,
bits.
or
Go ahead. I'm sorry. What was
Malico
that?
Records. They don't have to go to these
A
3
major
major
label?
labels. They can go to any other label. They don't have to follow these 3 major labels.
So you're saying they should go independent, like go to an indie label, a small one?
They can go to Malico. They can go to Stax. They can go to Peacock. They can go
Okay,
to.
so you just all right, got you. You're right.
And they go.
You don't like money.
If you really wanted to say that you wanted to contribute positive influences to your community, you don't compromise.
Got you. Yeah, you're right.
That's why
But
they
in
are where
today's
they
like,
are, and we are where we are.
Taj,
I think
please.
that in today's like rap. Oh,
Yeah, Taj,
for me to
you're
go,
a
right?
bit late. Taj, you're
Oh,
a
okay.
bit
I thought you
delayed,
told me to
so
shut
keep
up.
going.
Okay, my bad. Yeah. Sorry about that. I think that in today's like I guess music industry, like that vertical, like it's a lot different than how it was 20 years ago, where you had to go to a label to get this distribution. The internet's been a really big like game changer. Chance the Rapper, Logic, Snow the Product. I know Snow the Product isn't black, but there are a lot of artists out there that can like get their music like very widespread without having to go through a label that tells them to make violent music. And artists like these don't make violent music. But I wanted to point out that like you're talking about like music, you're talking about movies and TV and shit like that. That wasn't around during the 1920s. There was still like we still had black organized crime. Like I think I told you this like months ago that we still had black organized crime like 100 years ago during the 1920s. That had nothing to do with the music that we consumed or the were there movies that black people had access to in the 1920s or the TV shows or movies that we consumed. It had more to do with like environments. It had more to do with like poverty. It had more to do with like a lack of access to things that non-second class citizens had access to that we just didn't have access to. I think that if we're talking about like black crime, I think these come from like when I say environmental factors, I mean poverty. I mean like what do you see or what do you experience when you walk outside of your door or inside of your community. That's not saying that hip hop music or TV shows or movies or anything like that had too much influence on like today or 100 years ago. But violence still happened, right? So what do you think the cause of that was, DeAndre? Do you think it was like poverty or do you think it was like something like biological or a combination of both? What do you think it is?
Well, it's not biological. There's no biological evidence that one particular species of people is more violent than another one.
Very good.
The issue that came from it, as I said before, it all came down to cultural. Now you can say that there are some issues of poverty involved, but the biggest issues come down to how we, as a culture, decided to react, and as opposed to propping up the types of culture that we needed, which was more of the at the time, more of the W.E.B. Du Bois, the more Booker T. Washington types, the more uh, uh, Frederick Douglass types. We propped up the exact opposite of that, and that became the culture that we became beholden to, and we propped that culture up. We had a significant culture
Who did we prop
within
up
the
100
black
years ago that was like a
we had a significant culture within the
Or
Black
P Diddy.
Renaissance, where we had great music. I mean, Harlem. When we took over Harlem in the 20s, the music was a combination of black rhythmic music and a combination of really how pop came to be was a combination of black rhythmic, well, it's jazz, I think, black rhythmic music and a
Okay,
combination
let's
of
let's move this
the
along. We have very little
Oh,
time, so like, yeah,
okay, so
Tosh.
during like the 80s where we had people like oh yeah. So there's a lot of places that so all right. During the 80s when we had things like Zapp and Roger and they're making like music like there's a lot of music in the 80s that was like a lot different than the music of today or 20 years ago, right? But there was more crime though. Like was it the music then that was making that crime happen or was it something else?
before the 80s, we did not have a system that destroyed the black culture, the black family system. When
Oh,
we
so
fir-
now
when
you're
we first
finally getting
got
back to it.
when we
Thank you.
first got involved, that's what I've been talking about. The culture,
No, but
culture.
no, because you're blaming the culture when it's a result of systemic actions that were taken. Like early, like I thought you understood earlier. You talked about fatherlessness, right? And we can see
Yeah,
that fatherlessness impacts all of these things that you're talking about, which become cultural artifacts because people are coping with the situation that exists in front of them. So the degradation of culture that you're seeing is because systemically the black family was outright attacked. And then you're saying that the
well, I'm
result, which
saying that
is the
the
degradation of culture, was the cause. When we can see that,
no,
hey,
I'm
if
talking
you
about things that
increase
happened
black
before
fathers,
that these things happened before then.
so
This is
so
what the
hold on.
examples
This is
that
my
I gave.
question to you. Hold on, wait, I want to make this real succinct. Okay, you talked about fatherlessness, and you uh, obviously understand some of the effects. If you put black fathers in homes that consume the music that you think is vile, do you think that black father, do you think that black family cohesion overcomes the things that you think are degradative about black music? And the answer is obviously yes. So obviously you see like
No, I
the
don't. I don't. It
attack on
depends.
you don't
It depends.
what?
It depends on.
Can,
It depends on the father. If you were to take the modern black man today and just inject them into the household, I don't think it would make much of a difference. But if you were to take a a black
wait.
a black man who had the same the same principles and morals as a
You're
black man
aware
that
that
existed.
you're aware that earlier when you referenced fatherlessness, there does not exist a study that says, "Oh, a black father with this moral character." Right? They just talk about the presence or the absence of black fathers. There isn't a study that you were referencing earlier when you were talking that goes into, "Oh, a black father with this moral." Like it doesn't exist, right? So you're making like I'm fine with you like like deductively deciding things, but like you have to agree that you're making this up right now, and that any of the studies that
No,
you were
because if
referencing
you
before that
take
talked
a
about
look,
the effects.
you take a look at what we have and large as a community as far as black role models that are male, they are all abysmal. So there's a very few amount that I think will actually cause positive change if we just drop them into the community. You're just going to take what we have now and
It,
drop them into the
is
community.
is there a study that exists that shows certain moral characteristics of the father that you were referencing from earlier? I don't think it does, right? We can agree with that,
I'm
right?
sure. I'm sure the study actually has a lot of that data in there.
Wait,
I would
you
love to
think
see
it?
it.
No. You
Deductively, we
wait.
can
Let's
prove
make sure.
that.
You're saying that the study would have the data on the moral characteristics of the father? You think they would account for
The
moral
study,
characteristics on a study just about the presence of fathers in homes?
Well,
the
deductively,
study
I think we can
was
say that.
Wait,
Uh, deductively, I think we can say that. I don't think we can have any conclusive proof, but
wait. No. Wait. Deductively, we can say what? That
that
they're controlling for the moral caliber of the fathers present or absent?
deductively, I think we can say that because the fact that they're not there in the household, I think
Oh
is
no, no.
That's not
immoral.
how that works.
That,
Immoral.
there
I
are
mean, I'm
plenty
just
of
saying
reasons a
Lord,
father could
that's
not be
so
around that.
bad logically. What are we
100%
saying?
proven.
Bruh.
I'm saying that
Io.
reasons why they're gonna be
So
immoral.
I gotta ask you a question. Do you think it's true that a person with upstanding moral character could be, for some reason, jailed and then they're not a part of their family's home? Right? Like the situation that extracts them from the home, it could be relationship problems, it could be anything, it could be a myriad of reasons, right? So we can't say that the people that aren't present probably have negative moral character, right?
Wait, we're
Like
moving
that'd
too
be the
far
race
past the
realist route.
point. We're moving too far past the point because, again, that's a total different argument. Saying we can extrapolate the moral fiber of parents being absent or present. That's not the same thing as saying in the study they're controlling for the
True.
moral fiber of the
True.
people who are there, right? Because the argument is about whether when fathers are there, the outcomes are better. He's trying to say it depends on the caliber and quality of the father when he's present. And I'm saying there doesn't exist a study today that would say for fathers who are present, we're going to be examining their moral fiber in order to determine whether or not they're actually good for the family being there or not. Because that's almost impossible. The idea, the subjective nature on the moral caliber of people that do you understand why that'd be so much more difficult to compare that when you're talking about just the presence or not? That's why I'm saying we can know for sure they did not control for the moral caliber of the people present. That was never represented in the study.
And I would say, in addition to everything Fanatic just said, because that's like the dagger, another dagger is the reason that they see fatherlessness as a good thing in almost all of these studies are due to like subconscious things that have nothing to do with moral character, right? It's about like playing with kids and they understanding boundaries, and it's about a bunch of things that you aren't like intellectualizing when you're communicating with kids as a father. So that it's even more damning that like first off, it's impossible to control for that almost, or it is definitely not in any study that's been released that I've seen. And I study fatherlessness like all the time. And then secondarily, the factors that they talk about wouldn't even be moral character when they talk about the outcomes being better and why those outcomes might be better with fathers in the home. So like on two levels, it absolutely blows away the idea that it could be the moral character.
So I'm not saying
That's
I'm
a
not
crazy
saying that.
argument.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. I disagree that. I think any father in the home is better than any father outside the home, and I think that any father in the home that actually wants to stay with their kids and actually raise them with love and care is a moral person in and of itself. And that's why I was saying that deductively, I think you can say that if they're not there, um, with good reason to not be there, like they're in prison for some bullshit or something, I think that speaks to their moral character that they're not there for their kids. I think that's immoral. And so
Wait.
I think that
That's a different argument, though.
Yeah.
That's not the argument that we were talking about. Like, you're just making the very banal and generic statement that fathers who abandon their kids are less moral than fathers who are there for their kids. Nobody
Yeah.
disagrees with that. Nobody disagrees with that. What we're saying is that fathers who are present in their kids' lives, the children still have better outcomes in the vast majority of cases,
I
right?
agree.
And what he's disagreeing with that and saying, well, it depends on the caliber of the father present. And and we're saying that there are no studies to support that, because the studies simply say that a father being present yields better results. Do I think that you can probably get more nuanced and probably make what I would say is an intuitive argument that morally upstanding and morally good men being present in their children's lives are likely to lead to better outcomes also? Yes, even more so. But like, fathers being in the home seems to be a really great control for outcomes that has been studied time over time in and time out. Like, moving to some other nebulous, subjective, intuitive, but like non-proven argument that, like, hey man, but the moralness needs to be there. That's just unsupported by data. There's just no reason to even go there.
So we'll have to leave it there and move on to our next subject. That was
Complete deviation because it was
It went
nonsense.
so
that
far off the
was
rails.
that
Wow.
was no.
I mean, like, we all
I'm
agree.
no, so
I think that ropes
that
on to gun violence pretty well.
yeah. I mean, I think it does map on because a lot of people consider that. That's why I was more than fine with this. The first 1v1 debate I had on Twitch was against a black conservative who lived in England, I believe. And they made the same points that our friend Pace was making. So it was an experience. So, but it was on the violence of the community. So some people see it as being related to that. So thank you for sharing your opinion on all that and everyone.